yarny friends, it is Rachel here with Yarn at Play. Today I am going to be doing an in-depth yarn review of Cake's Chain from Ice Yarn. But before I get into that, I wanted to give you a quick heads up that I do have a bunch of new merch on yarnatplay.com. Please go check that out if you are interested in that. And not only just merch, but also fun mugs with fun sayings, fun whip bags with fun sayings, all that good stuff. So be sure to check that out, yarnatplay.com. So let's get into it. So first of all, first impressions of this yarn. It has, as you can see, a beautiful gradient fade to it. This yarn just struck my eye and is just absolutely stunning to look at. And it is a chain construction, as you would expect from the name. It is a chain spun yarn. And I personally like working with chain spun yarns quite a bit. It is 90% acrylic and 10% polyamide. They come in these nice big 200 gram skeins. You get 2 of these in a pack, and they classify this as a 4 medium weight yarn. Now I would say that this is a 4 medium weight yarn, but it is a little bit on the thick side for a 4 weight. But with a chain construction, when you pull on that chain, it does slender down a little bit. So depending on your tension, it might function more as a chunky and might function more as a 4 weight. But either way, it is a really beautiful yarn and is nice and squishy soft. I will show you here what it looks like. I have another colorway here, and this color is obviously much darker, but you can still see that beautiful gradient fade from this really beautiful blue into a black, and then into a brown and a gray, and then back into that really deep, gorgeous navy color. And I'm going to show you what this looks like worked up on my Addi knitting machine so you can get kind of an idea of how slow that gradient fade transition is. Now I really like this because it has that really beautiful, slow fade transition. If you are looking for something with a nice slow gradient fade, this would be a great option for you. It is very pretty, very subtle. There are no hard line breaks with this gradient fade. It's just a very smooth transition from one color into another. And as far as how this worked up on my Addi knitting machine, this worked up like a dream. Like, this is one of the best yarns I think that I've ever used on my Addi. It went through it almost like the machine had no yarn on it at all. It worked really, really well, and it came out very nice and squishy soft after being worked up. And this is a very squishy, soft yarn to begin with. So I really, really liked the way that this worked up on the Addi. I loved how that gradient transition came through, and was really, really pleased with the look of this in knit form. Now let's take a look at what this looks like in crochet form. And I will show you what that looks like here. This is a cowbell scarf that I stitched together, and you can kind of see how that gradient transition made its way over a much wider fabric. So this was done back and forth until it made this circle, and then I stitched the circle together, joined it, and then started crocheting down farther. And then I came up and did this top portion here to make like the turtleneck portion. So this is separate. You can see this hardline break, but that's because the yarn was started here and went up. But here you can see that beautiful gradient fade. This fabric of this yarn has a really nice drape to it. I'm really pleased with how this lays and how this wears. It feels very nice, it looks very nice, and has just a really nice fabric to it when it is stitched up in crochet. Now I will go ahead and show you a little bit of what this rips back like before I show you how it crochets up. So this is a fuzzy yarn. It's not super fuzzy. It doesn't have a massive halo to it. I don't know if you can see it. I don't have a dark background here. But it doesn't have a huge amount of fuzz to it, but it does have some fuzz to it. So you can kind of expect to see that in how this rips back. And it rips back, for the most part, very, very well. I don't really have any major issues with pulling this out. Every once in a while, you might get a little snag just like that, But overall, for being a fuzzy yarn, it really does pull back quite nicely. So if that's something that you're concerned about, you really don't have to be overly concerned with this yarn as far as ripping back goes. Now I'm using a 6mm crochet hook here. I can't remember what I stitched this up in. I think it was a slightly larger hook. It might have been a 7, but I'm just gonna work it up with a 6 here just so that you can see how smoothly this works up as a stitch. And I really don't have any issues with stitching this up either. It feels nice on the hook. It has a good amount of glide to it. I mean, there's not really a ton of hesitancy or kind of like that stickiness sometimes feel that you can get. I can feel it just a smidge because this is an acrylic polyamide blend. So those fibers are synthetic. So there's always going to be a little bit of a stick factor with synthetic fibers, but it's not really noticeable. That's me being like very sensitive and being very aware of how this works up because I'm reviewing it. And I want to give you guys a very thorough description of how this works up. And I overall have been very, very pleasantly surprised with this yarn. This was recommended to me by one of my subscribers to try out. Thank you, Angela, for the recommendation. And I absolutely love it. She said that I would, and she was completely right. This has been one of those yarns that is just kind of blown me away and surprised me because I wasn't necessarily expecting it to work up as well as it does. But this really does work up very, very nicely, very quickly. You're not going to have a fight with this yarn. I'll put it this way, that way. This yarn won't fight you to get stitched up at all. You will do just fine with it and you won't have any issues with it. So let me go ahead and grab the swatch that I did my hot wash test on and show you what that looks like. Now, if you've watched my other in-depth yarn reviews, you will know that I usually swatch up an amigurumi ball so that you guys can kind of see what it looks like amigurumi style. I haven't done that because my hands have been having some real issues with doing amigurumi lately, and I didn't want that to hold me back from doing more in-depth yarn reviews. So for at least for the time being, I'm going to leave that portion out of my in-depth yarn review. If you're really desperate to know, I can do a little sample here and just stitch up a little bit with it and then put it in the comments and tell you what I thought. But I'm not going to do a whole full swatch just because of the issues that I've been having with my hand and my wrist lately. But let me show you what this looks like wash up after a hot wash and a hot dry. So here is what my fully washed swatch looks like. And just so you can see, I'll zoom in really close here. You can see that it is fuzzing a bit on the edges, but there is no pilling on this whatsoever. The fuzzing isn't any more than I would expect to see after putting any yarn through a hot wash and a hot dry cycle. There is no pilling that I can see at all. The swatch still looks amazing. The colors are nice and vibrant. There's no loss of color. The fabric itself still feels nice and squishy soft. And when I compare the two, there really is minimal difference. If there is any difference at all, I would say that this feels just the tiniest little smidge stiffer. But I think that's just because I put an acrylic fabric through a hot dry. So that's just gonna make those fibers just melt slightly into each other. But as far as like drastic change in the feel of the fabric, it's not really drastic at all. If you didn't tell me beforehand that this was washed, I probably wouldn't know just based on the feel of the yarn itself. Like they both feel very nice and soft, very cozy. This is a really great winter yarn. And I think that it might even be a little bit extra warm just because of that chain construction. It has that extra kind of like air in the fabric or in the yarn and could potentially be a little bit warmer. I don't know that for sure. That's just a guess, but that would be my guess. And you can see kind of here on the strand, you can see some of that fuzzing of the fibers a little bit, but you can also see, hopefully, because this is such a dark yarn, hopefully you can see that, oh, focus in there, there we go. The chain itself is not as loose as it was when it was not washed. So I'll put these side by side. You can see how the chain construction here is a little bit looser. The chain construction here is a little bit tighter, which just kind of goes to show that those fibers have kind of melded together a little bit through the hot wash, hot dry process. Now, what would my recommendation be for washing this yarn? I would not be concerned about putting this through a hot wash again. I wouldn't say that that's my recommendation, but I would not be fearful of that. When I looked at it when it came out of the wash, there was very little difference whatsoever from when it first went in. The only thing that I might say as far as washing and drying goes is that if you have the option to do a tumble dry low, that is what I would recommend for this. I wouldn't recommend putting it through a hot dry, but if it did accidentally get thrown in the dryer on hot, you could be confident that it would not destroy your piece. It wouldn't. But just to be on the safe side and to really protect your finished project, I would say probably tumble dry low or lay flat to dry if you really wanted to be extra cautious. But this is 100% machine washable. I would not be anxious about that at all. I would recommend doing it on a lower temperature than hot, but even if it did, again, if it got thrown in on hot, your project would survive and still look just stunning. So I will go ahead and put the pricing breakdown on Cake's Chain up here on the screen so that you can see exactly what that price breakdown would look like. I think that this, even though it might be a little bit more than you might pay for something in store for a cake of yarn, maybe, it's still definitely worth it. And the thing is that most cakes in store are gonna run you a little bit more money than other skeins of yarn. And this is a good size skein. You can see how the size of it in comparison to my hand here, and I don't have small hands. This is a 200 gram skein. It has 450 meters in it, which I believe, I will put it up here, I believe comes out to being right around 490 some yards. 489 maybe, is that what I think it was? Anyways, I'll put the exact yardage on the screen so you will know exactly how many yards it is. But that's a good amount of yarn for one cake of yarn. And you really, like, that gradient, that fade, that spiral is just absolutely stunning. So as far as my overall recommendations for this yarn, if you are interested in it, I would 100% say go ahead and get it. You don't have to put in a giant order at Ice Yarn to make the shipping worthwhile. You really don't. I mean, obviously it's best to put in larger orders because then your price per skein for shipping does go down. But even if you were to pay full price for these 2 cakes of yarn with the worst case scenario for shipping, which this would be the only thing in your cart, I still think that it is definitely worth the money. I think that you will love it. If you are into chain spun, if you like gradients, if you like that fiber content of the acrylic and the polyamide, this is 100% a winner. It has great drape, has a great feel, works up really nice. And if you have a knitting machine, this yarn is just an absolute dream on a knitting machine. So those are my overall reviews of this yarn. I would definitely recommend it. If you are interested in seeing all the different colorways that they have available in this yarn, definitely check out the link just below in the description box. I am an Ice Yarn affiliate, but I am not here to sell you yarn. I am here to give you my honest and full 100% truthful opinion. And I really love this. And if I don't like something, I will tell you. But this one surprised me in all the right ways and really is a winner in my book. So I hope that you enjoyed this review. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today, Yarny friends, and I will see you all next time.